Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have a guest that I've wanted to really get on, but also I've got dive deep into his stuff this offseason. Coach Tony Holler is the head track coach at Plainfield North High School. He is a former football coach, but I think he's probably most well known, obviously, for his track perspective, but also his Feed the Cats program, which has, in my personal opinion, has helped kind of revolutionize not only how track coaches think about practicing and developing track athletes, but other sports like football have started to develop their off-season programs to develop speed, agility, and kind of a better way to do things. Coach, how are you doing?
Good, very good.
Well, the first way I want to get started with this is, and I ask every guest this, and this is episode 102, is kind of your background. How did you end up as I know you've talked about a little bit of stuff I've watched, but for those who may not know, how did you end up as the head track coach at Plainfield North?
Yeah, I always say that I'm kind of defined by my father. My dad was a basketball coach at the high school and college level for 47 years. And it was not like a lightly participation type thing. He was a head coach for 44 of those 47 years. And so I grew up as his oldest son, and he took me everywhere, the locker rooms, the gymnasiums, the bus rides. I fell in love with the entire process. He loved everything about it. He loved the ups and downs, the wins, the losses, the uniforms, the planning, the relationships, of course. And so I went into coaching myself, and I became a head basketball coach at the age of 23. I probably took the worst basketball job in the state of Illinois. And that's how you get a head job at the age of 23, right? You go to a place that has a 33 game losing streak, and all of a sudden I'm the head coach, and I coached at that place for 8 years, and did well in my last 3 years, but pissed somebody off, and I got fired in 1990. Strangely, 1 month before I got fired, that same board that didn't like me as a basketball coach begged me to be the track coach. You can't make this stuff up, right?
Yeah.
And so with a family of four, and a wife that was a teacher and a shit ton of debt, I had to remake myself. I had to grow where I was planted, and I'd always had a track background. I'd always been, I was a college track athlete as well as a basketball player. And I was an assistant coach during those early years at Harrisburg, Illinois. And so I remade myself, and in the next next 14 years, my teams won 8 state trophies and 3 state championships. And around 1999, I changed the way I coach, where we tried to attract the best athletes of the school to my program. I've always said that every school has a great track team. It's just that they aren't running track. And so track was a miserable sport. And I was like, why is it miserable? So I took a speed and power approach. And I believe that my kids, even though they would be terribly undertrained, would still really be successful because we would out athlete people.
Yeah.
What I was unaware of was that we were not undertrained. We were perfectly trained, because we trained speed. And all my guys, even my slow guys, my middle of the road guys, they all got faster. And I was like, damn, I'm kind of onto something here. And so I went 2 years to Franklin, Tennessee. I had a couple good seasons there. And then, Tennessee Tennessee teachers are paid terribly. So I came to the Chicago suburbs for a lot more money. And that's why I'm at Plainfield North now. And I've been here for 15 years. I just finished 2 days ago. I finished my 41st year of coaching track. And yeah, here I am. And I'm enjoying it probably more now than I ever have.
Good. I mean, you see, like when I watch stuff with you, you seem excited, like all the time. Just talk, like it's like, and that's kind of what I mean. I think ideally as coaches, we look for is we're excited to talk about what we're doing, like. And you, I mean, we've all seen the coaches who are just, for a variety of reasons, are miserable for their circumstances, or how there are a lot of reasons why. But I think it's just really interesting, that perspective, because I mean, obviously that how you train started as a track mythology. I'll just phrase it that way, like trying to get more kids out. And then it's kind of evolved into obviously other sports. I mean, I think the most pronounced one is with your football track consortium. But other sports have taken, like I was trying to sell it to our softball coach the other day.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
she was asking me about running and speed, and I pretty much said, we don't like mass run anymore. Like I'm like, I don't just run like gassers to run gassers. I was like, we time 9 to 12. Worst case, it might be 15 at some point this summer on like a higher day. But I was like, we time 9 to 12 things. Okay. About 3 reps for each thing we're timing. And then we're done. Like, and then we're in the weight room and I'm focusing on single leg movements, single arm movements, hip movements, running fundamentals, stuff like that. And she got very curious about it. I'm like, so I just sent her your YouTube channel. And I'm like, here, go listen. I mean, it's like, and I kind of point out, like, our sport is 4 to 6 seconds, 30 seconds between, as you know. So that's kind of, again, I'm trying to push it, and it was pushed on to me. I'm just curious, before we get into the feed cat sports, how did this start spreading? Like, because I know, like, everybody does something, and it then just starts growing like wildfire. Like, because it's not just like people in your state. Like, I have 2 random coaches on the opposite end of the states that I've talked to this offseason that implement the Feed the Cats program. So how has this spread?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just got an email from the big school state champs in Oregon, reporting their boys had won the state championship with a pure Feed the Cats approach, 3 consecutive in South Dakota. I did 5 workshops in Ireland and England on Feed the Cats. First of all, I think a lot of people today intentionally try to brand something and create a side hustle and try to make it blow up. And a lot of times they're like 25 years old. And I want to tell them the Bob Dylan line that he says, "I'll know my song well before I start singing." And I knew my song well. I started calling great athletes cats in 1999. And the whole idea that we are going to nourish athletes, not break them. We're going to feed athletes. And so I did it in the first 6 years. We won the 4x1 state championship 4 times in 6 years and got 4th the other 2 years. So I knew we were onto something. That was something that was no state you ever hear of that. You know, I mean, nobody dominates the 4x1 because you graduate, you're good kids, and then you got slower kids, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And so I knew I was onto something. But, you know, when you're coaching at a smaller school and nobody ever asked me a question, you know, but when I was about 50, I was in my 50s, I was asked to write an article. And I was on Twitter. That's probably why, you know, I'm active on Twitter. Yeah. And somebody thought, well, you know, this guy I think has a lot to say. And little did I know that I had a whole lot to say, because as a track coach, nobody gives a flip about your team. If they ask you about your team, you see them start to exit before you get your answer out. You know, they really, nobody cares. We coach an orphan sport, and parents don't even come to our sport. And so I had all this information stuff built up in my head, and I started writing, and I've written enough now to fill 7 books. And it's people read, and you know, and Twitter. It's really been the fact that I had a lot to say, and we are living in a time now where you don't have to have a lot of credentials to get published. You know, you can publish yourself. You can say things. I'm on a podcast with right now with a high school coach I've never met before from Ohio, and this is how ideas spread. Now, you know, getting back to the idea that that there's a lot of young coaches right now trying to take over the world. It's, you know, you really have to have something worth listening to.
Yeah.
something that makes sense. And you talk about how I'm excited all the time. That's not fake. I reflect the enthusiasm of my athletes. My athletes love track, I believe, more than any track athletes in the world. And that's by intent, not by default. My good friend Steve Jones says, you're either going to have culture by intentionally, you're going to intentionally have culture, or you're going to have culture by default. And most coaches, it's by default. Mine is intentional. I want my kids to love track and field because I found that kids are really good at what they like and they're obsessed with what they love. And if you can get them to that obsession point in your sport, your work is easier and you will go home excited, because as coaches, we reflect our kids. If our kids are broken and miserable, we will go home to our wife and kids broken and miserable ourselves. And that's no way to live a life. So my excitement is very organic and natural, based on the reflection of really cool things with my athletes.
Now, you earlier talked about trying to attract more athletes. Okay. And I think you're right. Track has a perception you're just going to run the whole time, and it can scare people away. Just like football has that same perspective.
Yep. Same thing.
It's just, you're going to run, it's going to be miserable, and you're going to work long hours, which is also, there's a big contingent in our sport that are looking at, okay, how can we shorten the week for our kids, but still get an effective dosage? How did you initially, I mean, because I can go in a school, somebody could hire me tomorrow and tell all the athletes in the building, you're going to run less, have more fun. But how did you, when you went to this methodology of, okay, we're going to find an optimal level of dosage, okay, how did you sell that to the kids to get them to come out? Or did the first couple of years where you started winning solve that problem for you? How did you find that sell point to the kids?
That's a really good question. And I was going to answer it one way, and then you talked about winning. Motivation comes from success.
Yes.
And we coaches don't understand that enough. They see it as wins, but I think we need to set kids up to be successful in practice too. And that's the record, rank, and publish thing, where testing is training and training is testing. We are constantly want to show kids that they're better than their former self. And you can't do that without data, without real data, whether it's, like, look at you benching, 115 as a freshman, and now you're benching 225. That's motivation. If you tell a kid, hey, you were running 18 miles an hour as a freshman, and now as a sophomore, you're running 20. Hey, where are you going to be running as a senior? That's how you build that fire. So success is really, really important. And sometimes we can't control winning games. Sometimes you fumble twice in the fourth quarter and you lose.
Yes.
But yet, I think we overreact to losses. And of course, you know what football coaches do when they lose, right?
You run.
We were soft,
yeah.
And we need to condition more. We were cowards in the fourth quarter. No, you fumbled twice. Shut up. But football coaches are just the worst at defaulting to, the intangibles, the toughness, conditioning, blah, blah, blah. And so because sometimes we can't control the games, we have to make sure that kids see success in the off season and see success in practices. And so one of the things that delineates Feed the Cats from old school is that old school didn't care about performing in practice. They just didn't care.
Yeah.
In the 70s, I was a quarterback for my high school football team, and we wore these like $8 shoes that had like soft cleats, and I mean, they were like high tops, because we didn't care if we were fast. Then we had game shoes. Well, that's kind of a metaphor for the way we practiced compared to how we wanted to play. What I believe is that we need to perform twice a week in practice and perform in the game. So we have 3 performance days a week where we're going to wear our game shoes. We are going to run at game speed plus. It's going to take more recovery than football teams are used to taking in order to get those high speeds. So I think all that is really important. But then let's get back to how you sell it to kids. You sell it by saying that we are not going to be a program that crushes you. We are not going to crush you. We're not going to break you. I mean, we might break horses, but we don't break human beings. We are not going to break you and build you back better, like we're the Marines or something. This is not a paramilitary operation. This is a game, and we are going to perform in practice. To perform, we're going to have to focus on being healthy and being fresh as possible and fast as possible. Football is a game of high outputs. It's not a game of steady outputs. But yet you look at some of the best coaches in America, their teams never stop moving in practice. They are running from drill to drill, station to station. And I'd argue 50% of it does not contribute to winning games, but it looks good. It looks like that football coach is highly organized. And man, he's got those guys going and hustling and hustle. Football is not a hustle sport. Football is a performance sport where we want to be at absolute maximal speeds, maximal intent on every damn play. And your best players are going, well, if they play both ways, they're still going to play less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
In a 2.5 hour game. So why would we have a 2.5 hour jog to prepare for 10 minutes of high intensity? We just don't do it.
Yeah. Well, that's where I was watching. Oh, you dropped your football. You've dropped 6 episodes the past like 2 weeks. And I forget you had Heinz talked about that, about how the average college player doesn't play more than a total of 8 minutes in a game. Right. And it's the same thing, like even high school football, worst case, high school football, you might double that, and you're not going to double that. It just because how the clock moves and how everything moves in high school is vastly different than college. But going back to your record, rank, publish, you talked about there, and we talked a little bit about this off screen before we started, is kids get excited when they see they hit new PRs. They just do. Like I said, we started a lot of this. Obviously we're a little limited with how much we're able to run in the winter, just because I don't have a super large facility to run, say a 40, but I have an indoor that I can at least run a 10, a 15, and a shuttle. So like all winter we run 10, 15s and shuttles and timing those, and kids were getting excited. Then we started once the weather cleared up, running 40s, timing that. And anytime a kid hit a new PR, got excited. And the great thing, because we use Team Builder, they put it in their phone and everybody gets to see it. So it's not only self-satisfying, but it shows it to everybody that you're improving. How have you approached posting it? And like, obviously a kid's going to know if he hits his own PR, but how have you gone with, hey, because obviously kids want to show off what they're doing. Like we don't want to create it's just about me, but you also want to build some self-confidence. How have you gone about posting it and approaching hitting PRs with your kids?
Yeah, I love that. When I first started in 99, all we did was 40s. That's it. And I do want to tell you, you mentioned the lack of facilities. Let me share this cool thing. There's a team in South Dakota that have won the last 3 state championships in track and field, and they used a couple runways in their longest hallway. Yeah. Like pole vault runways. But the principal was so excited about the culture changing in the school. And as you know, the better speed you have in track and field, the football coach should be happy as hell. The basketball coach should be being like, hey, my kids are jumping higher. We're better athletes, because we should all care about athletes. So what they did was they made it into a speed hallway. Okay. Where they went wall to wall with like a rubberized surface where kids could wear spikes. So now they have like an indoor track, a straightaway track in their longest hallway. And, we put flooring down the weight room. Yeah. Why not have, so anyway, I love sharing those stories, because I think it gives people hope that maybe, they could move into a direction where they could do more. Yeah. So having said that, when I first started timing, because we didn't have free lap, I'm a big free lap guy now. I don't know how you coach without it. I've had I was one of the earliest guys to get free lap about 10 years ago. I go all the way back to when they had free lap watches, where the watches were the chips. And now they have chips that go on your waist. So before free lap, it was timed 40s with a stopwatch. I just watched for movement of the hand, click it when their chest broke the plane of glass at the finish line. And then we'd run 3 and we'd average their best 2. Yeah. And so what I did, this is like the very dawn of spreadsheets back in 99, or at least dawn of my understanding of spreadsheets. I would do that, print it and put it in the hallway right across from the principal's office. And then a month later, he made me stop. Yeah. Because there was so much damn traffic in the main hallway that kids could not get to class. They were late to class because there were about 30 boys pointing to their times and all that. You can just imagine the excitement of being posted for the whole school to see. So then I just started taping it to the walls of the weight room. I ran the weight room back in those days. So you just took, like athletic tape and taped it to particle board walls in an old pole barn weight room. And that's where we posted it. So obviously flash forward to now. Now, of course, it's on my website, it's on Twitter. I put it all out on Twitter, and I use Google Sheets because, it's basically a spreadsheet that you can go share link, boom, you put it on Twitter, put a nice picture or video underneath it to get people's attention. You maybe highlight 2 or 3 kids from that performance that day, and then you just put it out there. Interesting thing, somebody asked me, do you have any blowback from parents? Like, I don't want my kid stuff out there for 8 billion people to see because he's now at the bottom of my list. In 23 years of doing this, not a single parent has objected. Yeah. Not a single one. Whereas in like, can you imagine posting test scores in school? There'd be a lawsuit, and that's probably what's wrong with education today. We're afraid of lawsuits and stuff. We should be competing on tests in education, but instead we don't compete. We tell kids not to compete. And it's just the opposite in sports, because if you're truly interested in performance, you must own your performance. You must measure it and own it. And that's what we do.
100%. I mean, it's that double-edged sword of in education where you want to post stuff not only to create competition, but just kind of develop self-worth. Yep. And you have that double-edged sword of, okay, what are we doing? What can we actually post? What can we legally do? Blah, blah, blah. All that stuff that is just a pain. And to be honest, I mean, it really is. But kind of continuing, you obviously talk a lot about how there is no perfect dosage. Like, it varies on kid, it varies on facility, there's a lot of factors. Like, I mean, a big factor for us is nutrition. How do you find that perfect dosage? Like, when you're looking for it, how do you find it?
It's a hell of a question. I use one of my favorite slides is a hormesis graph where trainings, whether it's a drug or training, and I think training should be looked at kind of like a drug that has an optimal dose. And so if you imagine training having a positive impact, I think everybody can agree training has a positive impact. Up until a certain point, my dad used to call that hump the point of diminishing returns. And so then after you have too much training, you actually start detraining your training. And if you keep going, you will break the damn athlete, and I call it burning the steak. So what you want to do, since you don't know where that hump is for every kid, and even for every kid, as you know, you talk about nutrition and so forth, especially in poverty situations, since you don't know where that hump is, and that hump can also change day to day based on what they've done the previous 24 hours, that you always want to err on the side of not burning the steak. You would rather have that steak be medium rare than medium, because medium is closer to burning the steak. So if you look at that, what happens is you develop healthy athletes. and they will actually be happier because you're training them less. They will look forward to their next practice the next day. You develop that like and love. Remember, that like and love is key, because once they like it, you got them, and once they love it, they don't even need you anymore. You know, they are self-motivating. They're building their own damn house every day. So by doing this, you will incrementally get better without, and this happens all the time, that one step forward, two steps back type thing. By never burning the stake, you know, you could make a, as Les Spellman, who I just met last weekend, says, if you're making a profit every day, you'll never go broke. And that's a great way to look at training. We want to make a profit every day. Now, it may be, it is not like going to the craps table with $100 and coming home with 100,000. Well, by the way, people who do that, they go broke, because if you bet it all, I mean, if you're trying to chase $100,000 and you only got 100, you're going to go home broke in probably an hour. You know, that's not a way to play craps, and it's not a way to train. So what we want to do is, going back to the metaphor of the craps table, you want to go with $100 and you want to get $20 up, and you want to put those damn chips in your pocket, take them to the window, cash them in, and go home. And then you come back the next day and win another $20, and the next day. And if we play the long game, I know you said that you have access to 7th grade through 12.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's 6 years of playing the long game. And you know, I'm telling you right now that most middle school kids get absolutely no training, and if they do get training, it's bad training. So yeah. So if you can have an impact, speed and power wise, starting with 7th graders, and start building that love of sport, like of sport, and you start with like, hopefully it ends up being love, you will see absolutely huge gains in a 6-year period, and people will begin to see you as this master coach. And all you've been doing is understanding that speed grows like a tree, and has to be watered every day, and you take care of your kids and make it a great experience for them.
Yeah, and growth can, and like obviously you're looking at long-term growth, but you're looking at short-term growth. Like my example is, in our program last year, we had 2 kids that could run a sub 5-second 40. So we were really slow. I mean, that's just where we were. One of them graduated, so I had one of them retarded. Just so far this offseason, we are up to 10 that are sub 5-second 40s. I think by the time August 1st hits, I get hit 15. I think because we have a lot of like 5.01s, 5.09, 5.12. And some of that you can fix by just form. You know that as I do. Some of that is literally, if you have a bad start, that just screws you running a 40. So when you combine getting faster plus that, like I said, just the growth we've had, and like two of those kids are going to be 8th graders next year. Like that's the best part of it. Like, and so I think that's where you got to look at it. That's why like I've invested in team builder, and I've invested in timing. Like I would love to get a free lap when we can afford it. Like, because I'm with you, like just how much from an ease perspective and recording everything for you, it's all there. And you know, hand timing is not perfect by any means.
Right.
I mean, it just isn't. That's again where I'm looking at too. And like, I remember I've seen you. I kind of want to go in a slightly different direction as we kind of continue this for a second. Is I've seen you talk about lactate days and whether you use them or not use them. I remember listening to one of your speeches and how you like typically program like 2 or 3 in, but half the time you cancel most of them.
Yeah.
Is a lot, and just so I understand it correctly, is a lot of that just because of where your kids are timing wise? Is it because of a rest recovery point? Why do you end up canceling a lot of those instead of, okay, we have them scheduled and keeping them?
Yeah. First of all, health trumps a workout always. I mean, one time I had a kid with turf toe. He was my fastest kid. and he literally did not practice one day during May. But he still was all state in 2 events at the state meet. It hurt him still. but you know, I am not going to take a kid with, if a kid has the onset of shin splints, they don't practice that day. That's so hard for a football coach, because the tradition of football is that every kid is banged up. Every single kid is banged up. And I realize that you have to play the game with a sore ankle. But I really believe that practice wise, if you are making a bad situation worse in practice, that kid would be better off not practicing that day and being more in better health come game time. And you know, the old school thing, as you know, like, hey, if you miss a practice, you don't play in the game, you know, that kind of stuff. Well, I'm all about performance. I'm not about rules. I don't have any rules. You know, I guess I have one rule. You have to come to practice every day, period. You know, that's our one rule. Everything else is culture. So, so getting back to lactate. So the people understand what lactate is. Lactate is going full speed for over 15 seconds. That's what it is. And the reason why we do lactate workouts in track and field is because we have to transition from a base of pure speed and power. I mean, we don't ever do anything resembling anything hard in the off season. All we do is sprint and strength. That's all we do. Sprint and power. I like the word power because power means like fast strength, you know, explosive strength. You know, slow strength just doesn't translate to performance, in my opinion. It could be a base for you know, fast strength, but slow strength is just not performance. Doesn't seem like performance to me. So we have to transition from running really, really fast for a couple seconds to being able to run really, really fast for my sprinters are all 400 guys. So we have to run really, really fast for like 55 seconds. So how do we transition? We transition with lactate workouts, where we'll do something like the 23-second drill, which means we run as fast as we can, see how far we can get in 23 seconds, take 8 minutes off. Kids become very acidic. They double up in fetal positions and so forth. They're not sick. They're just very acidic. You know, it's that glycolytic stuff where really strong anaerobic stuff produces lactate, which changes it into, creates lactic acid. And when it changes into lactate, you become acidic. It's not the lactate that makes you sick. It is the acidity that makes you sick. So we do that to biochemically become tough enough to sprint the 200 meters and the 400 meters. So you're probably wondering, what in the hell would that have to do with football? And that's a good question. I don't think it does, unless you are trying to create some biochemical toughness, and somehow that might translate to something. Personally, I would never do lactate work with football players, ever. Now, if you do, I would always do it on Friday or Thursday, the end of the week, because it has a 48-hour hangover. Your athletes will be diminished for 48 hours. It's crazy. If you had a speed day the next day, they'd all be slower. Yeah, all of them. So we don't practice the day after a lactate workout. So if you do lactate work in the summer or off season, make sure you do that at the end of the week so that it does not interfere with speed training. You don't want anything to ever interfere with speed training. If you need to crush their legs, which I would question in the weight room, you do that at the end of the week too. So you have so speed is never compromised. And so you're probably thinking, well, how do we transition in football? I think it's really important. Football, from doing pure speed and power to doing it 60 times in a game. I believe what you do is sprint capacity workouts, which is different than lactate. Here's a sprint capacity workout. With free lap, you know, everybody, you know, let's say we have a group of 12 guys, we put chips on them, and they run through, you know, like a 10 meter run in to a 40-meter fly. Yeah. And they walk back. They do 10 of those in 10 minutes. Can you see the relationship between that and football? Compare that to running 2 miles, 8 laps on the track.
No.
The 8 laps on a track has nothing to do with football. And people say, oh, well, it increases their aerobic engine. Don't listen to those guys. Those guys are textbook people, research people. They've never, if they coach anybody, they're terrible at it. What you want to do is increase their capacity to do high level things.
Yeah.
And you're not trying to crush them. You'll be surprised when you do those 1040s. The fastest guys will run the fastest at the end, not the slow guys. If you have distance runners, that'd be weird, but distance runners on your football team, they're not going to be really good in their 10th one. No, they're going to be slow in all of them because they're not fast. So you're improving their ability. And you say, well, wait, that's only like 10 of them though. How does that allow you to do 60 to 80 plays in a game? Well, that's where I believe that you let the game be the hardest thing you do.
Yeah.
It sounds bizarre. I mean, my dad used to say, we're going to make practice so hard that the games will feel easy. I have flipped that. Practice is going to be high performance. And the game's magic, there's magic in a game. If you're really fast, you're going to be fast in the fourth quarter. I've never seen fast guys that become slow in the fourth quarter, ever. Slow guys, on the other hand, fatigue, I believe, very quickly. No matter how hard you work them, slow guys, and that's called speed reserve. If you can run 22 miles an hour, 18 miles an hour seems pretty damn easy. If you can run 18 miles an hour, you can't do 18 miles an hour the whole game. You've got to be fast to be fast sub-maximally. You have to be fast to be fast when you're tired. And so what I would do, getting back to, I would work speed and power end of the week, especially, maybe the first month go all speed and power. Second month, end of the week, start doing that sprint capacity thing. And somebody may say, well, isn't that the same as gassers? About the same length. Yeah, about 40. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're getting a 55-second walk back, which allows you to run fast in all 10. And they say, well, gee, in a game, you don't get 55 seconds. I don't care. We're going to make performance the important thing in practice. And then we're going to let the game be the hardest thing we do. And your kids will be just fine. If not, you sub for them and keep them as fresh as possible.
Well, it's even like, I understand you don't get 55 seconds, but you get 30 to 40 typically, unless you are in a no huddle, nonstop team. But even then you get about probably still 15, 20 second break in between. Like you just do. I do want to ask you, because I mean, obviously I'm not a track coach by any means. I don't pretend to be, don't pretend to understand a lot of your sport, but I go to at least a couple meets every year to support our kids. Mostly to watch our throwers, because that's where most of my kids end up being, just to be honest. I go to the throwing section. My middle school coach is the throwing coach for the middle school down there. So easy conversation and all that jazz. And then I'll go watch some of my athletes run. But you talked about injuries, shut them down. Okay. I mean, from a track perspective, what do you have them do when you shut them down? Like football, it's easy. You're shut down. You can still take mental reps. You could maybe still walk through stuff if you have shin splints, whatever it is. Okay. I'm just curious, just because I'm a curious person. How do you handle that part with track when obviously they're not running because you said shin splints or their turf toe or whatever? How do you still have them involved during practice?
Yeah, you'd probably be disappointed in my answer because I just think that cats sleep 20 hours a day, I believe a day off might be better than totally off might be better than anything we could do. Obviously, you can go spin a bicycle, and I would say spin it for 30 seconds, get off of it, have a drink of water, get back on it, spin it for 30 seconds. Don't do a slow jog for 60 minutes or something. Obviously, you can do push-ups, you can lift, blah, blah, blah. You can stay athletic in many ways. One of the things we tell anybody that's banged up, 1 extra hour of sleep. I love real simple things that are doable. Sleep is when we grow. Sleep is when we adapt. Sleep is when hormones flow through our body, and sleep is when we recover. Like recover from injuries. If you can get an extra hour of sleep, you will be less sore the next day. Sleep is the magic in our life, and nobody ever told me that as an athlete. Sleep was something that you wish you wouldn't have to do, because like when you're young, you want to stay up all night. At least I did, and so sleep is really, really important. I'll tell you this story. This is an incredible story. My good friend Chris Corfist had an extremely fast guy named Kahari Williams 10 years ago. And Kahari was not getting faster. 5 consecutive weeks, his numbers were stagnant. And Chris, being an out of the box thinker like I am, said, Kahari, we're going to start taking Mondays off. So they took Monday off, and all of a sudden his speed numbers jumped. So Chris, being a scientist, a mad scientist for sure, says, okay, we're going to start taking Mondays and Tuesdays off. They saw more jumps in his speed. Well, to make a long story short, by the end of the year, he stopped practicing, and his times started to explode.
Yeah.
Now you may think, well, shit, we can't do that in football. Like we can't have guys not practice. And you're right. You do need to practice, and you do need reps. But as soon as you start hearing those stories by really smart people, don't throw anything at me, but practice is overrated. As coaches, we think practice is our canvas, and we overestimate the value that we have on kids through practice. As soon as you start thinking that way, you free yourself to practice less, to maybe practice with more recovery. You free yourself to hold a kid out for his own good. And that freedom allows you, I think, to really evolve into a better coach. I think when we don't have that freedom and we just have to keep grinding through the whole season, we end up with a diminished team. And probably worst of all, that diminished team is reflected by the staff. And secretly, your assistants are kind of hoping they lose that last game so they don't have another week in the playoffs. That absolutely happens in programs all over America. If that's not the thought inside of your assistant's head, it is in their wives' heads. And as you know, wives talk about that stuff. Yeah. I can't believe, I hope this season's over this week, and you don't want that. You want everybody excited. You want people crying tears after that last game. Not really because they lost, but because they don't get to come out and do it again next week. When you get that, I think you have it all. So yeah, I just, the happiness and healthiness of athletes is non-negotiable to me. That is not something, if my athletes are miserable, I refuse to coach. I just will not do that, because kids have one chance to go through sports. For sure, football, right? You're not going to play any football when you're our age. You got one chance, and so let's make it a fantastic, not just games. It's not like practices suck, but the games are going to be fun. No, we are going to make football a positive experience from Sunday to Sunday.
Yeah. Now you mentioned sleep there, and I agree 100%. And obviously today's, for a variety of reasons, our students do not get enough sleep. There's a lot that goes into it. How much do you talk about nutrition with your kids? Like I said, when we talked before we came on, like that's a huge part for me. It's a lot of that's because of our socioeconomics.
Yeah.
But how much are you talking to kids about nutrition? Obviously, and I say this all the time to our kids, I'm not going to be disillusioned and say they're never going to eat a potato chip or drink a pop. Like I'm not that naive. But you can at least talk to them and try to get them, like we provide a lot of protein to our kids. How much do you deal with nutrition on a daily basis?
I used to be totally wrapped up in nutrition. I'm talking like back in the 80s. I was reading Fit or Fat, Protein Power, I was constantly dialed into nutrition. Now I feel like nutrition is important, but is dwarfed by sleep. I mean, sleep is absolutely the number one. I think it's important that you prioritize things as well. I think number two, consistent drinking of water, sipping water all day long. I think really good athletes carry water with them. I mean, if you, not that I'm a bodybuilding fan or a powerlifting fan, but bodybuilders and powerlifters, they carry water with them. I think sprinters should. I think football players should. They should carry water with them. It should be, water is consistent throughout the day. I don't know if you show, Troy Aikman posted a picture of him being all ripped and stuff down southern Florida, South Florida. And one of the things he does is, I think he drinks, I don't believe it, but 2 gallons of water a day. That, like Tom Brady's come out with, like, water is the key. So priority number 1, sleep. Priority number 2, water. And then for nutrition, this. I take this from Alan Bishop. He is a spectacular S&C coach for Houston basketball. Very successful season, blah, blah, blah. I just love everything he puts out. I've asked him to speak at TFCs, and he's just a busy guy, but we hope to get him someday. But he says this, and I just love it. He says, eat like a man. Eat like a man. And when you tell your kids that, you'll see them thinking. And then you bring up things. What does a man eat? Does he eat crackers and Skittles? Hell no. A man eats meat. He eats his vegetables. He eats his starches. He eats his salads. Eat like a man. And what Alan does, he'll post stuff. And it's some of the best postings ever. It'll show a plate of food that his basketball players are eating. And it's like, there's like a pound of meat. There's big, vegetables. There's potatoes. There's fruit. Eat like a man. Don't eat out of a box. Don't eat out of a bag. Don't eat a Pop-Tart for breakfast and a candy bar for lunch. Men don't eat like that. You're eating like a little boy, a little spoiled brat little boy. Don't give in. So I think, it sounds like I'm challenging their manhood, and I think I am. We football coaches more than anybody say they want to turn boys into men. It's weird. You never hear any coach say, I'm going to turn a girl into a woman. It's always boys to men. But there's this manhood DNA in us that we want to be like a man. We want to be strong and courageous and blah, blah, blah. And if you challenge them to eat like a man and explain what that means, I think it'll go a long way. Now,
I have 3 questions left for you. One, I have to ask you because you're obviously wearing the shirt, and I can't ignore the fact that you have RPR on. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know a lot about RPR. I have a friend that is RPR trained, and he speaks wonders about it. I've heard you talk about it. I've seen some of the videos of RPR and it being done. Do you want to talk a little bit about what RPR has done for y'all and kind of how you've sold it to the kids? So I think that's the other thing. Like when you do stuff like that, obviously it works, but you still have to get buy-in. And I think that's where stuff like that, coaches, to be honest, especially football coaches, struggle with. It just is.
Anything we do, we have to get buy-in. We have to sell it. I have to sell every damn workout we do. I have to, even workouts that we do daily, like a speed workout, I have to sell it. This is why we're doing it. This is why it's important. I have to bring enthusiasm. I have to caffeinate myself sometimes to do it. So I got involved with Be Activated because Chris Corfist, Dan Fichter saw a guy named Douglas Heel in England and said, holy cow, this is a game changer. We can use this Be Activated thing that Douglas Heel's putting out to improve performance and make our athletes more durable in sports. So Chris, being Chris, called up Douglas Heel and said, what would it take to bring you here? So he started bringing them about once every 3 months from South Africa over to here. And then he invited me to hear it because I'm a good friend and I write. And so I probably wrote more about Be Activated than any person on the planet. And about 4 years ago, they started having problems legally with the word activated, because there's things called MAT, muscle activation techniques, and blah, blah, blah. And there's all these cease and desist letters, blah, blah, blah. We're going to sue you. And so not we, but Chris Corfist and J.L. Holdsworth and Cal Dietz made this subsidiary kind of, broke free of Be Activated, broke free of Douglas Heel, and called it Reflexive Performance Reset. It's the same thing as Be Activated. They've marketed it better, they simplified it, they teach it really well. And basically, you talk about buy-in. What the first thing you have to do is you have to take the course and attend and get around people who know what they're doing. And then what you can do is you can bring your kids into a classroom, auditorium, or something like that, and explain why it's so valuable. And once again, if you can't explain it, can't sell it, then it's never going to work. But there are certain things that you can do where you press on certain parts of the body and you can show to the whole crowd, look at the change in his body now. You know, like the change in strength, the strength, you know, like one of the things RPR does is releases, without stretching, we don't stretch, it releases tightness. So you become, you develop a bigger range of motion just because of belly breathing. And by the way, if it sounds weird that you're pressing on parts of the body to make your body better, I know it's voodoo, totally voodoo. What's not voodoo is belly breathing. Belly breathing changes you. If you can read the book Breath by James Nestor, The Oxygen Advantage. I mean, little things like breathing through your nose makes you a much healthier, better performer. Breathing through your mouth is the opposite. So there's all these scientific things about breathing. And so what we do is that we sell it, first of all, and we have the wow things going on. We work on a guy on a table and he gets up and goes, I've never felt like this before, blah, blah, blah. And so we get that buy-in. And then what I do is I do like I have to admit, I haven't been as good at it this year. COVID has just disrupted everything, but we are going to be really good at it every day next year. We do this like 3-minute thing during our warm-ups where we belly breathe, we press. If anybody talks, I like kick them out of practice or something. Nobody will ever talk again. You know, this is like being at church or something. And we start pressing and belly breathing and we go through everything. And if people want to see that, I actually posted something on my YouTube channel about how we do RPR. So people can go to that and check it out. Implementation is really different. I spent 3 weeks with a great football team that went 14-0 in Illinois, Nazareth, in the Chicago area. And they did not do self RPR. They had like 3 or 4 tables at games, and they would invite people like me or Chris Corfus, doctors that knew how to do RPR, trainers who knew how, and they'd come in and be like working on kids. And then next kid would get on the table. So there's different ways to implement. I don't think you can get on tables for every practice, and they did not. They did it as a part of their warm up when they were doing speed drills, shoulder pads off, helmets off. They would do some RPR thing after every speed drill. To me, I've compressed that. We'll do like 5 speed drills, and then we do like 3 minutes of RPR, and we're done. You can get a lot done in 3 minutes. I would say 15 minutes on a table might be twice as good, but just like you talking about, everybody has to grow where they're planted. You know, if you don't have an indoor track, you go to the next best thing. And that's kind of the way RPR is too. You got to strike that balance between what's optimal and what's doable.
Now, the second to last question is, I've seen your optimal like speed, non-speed days for football, Saturday and Sunday as rest days.
Yep.
My question to you is, especially for schools in Ohio or like mine, we play games on Fridays, JV games on Saturdays. Some of those JV kids play on Friday.
Yep.
You get a certain amount of quarters a week, blah, blah. how would you modify that schedule? That because obviously you're essentially having 2 speed days back to back for some of those JV kids. It's not optimal by any means.
Yeah.
I don't like having JV games on Saturdays.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. That's some things I can't change. So how would you approach that perspective at that point then?
Yeah, I the whole thing, the word optimal is something that like you can never get to.
Yeah.
Like, once again, you grow where you're planted. If right off the top of my head, if I was in your position, say, okay, we play games on Friday night, we play games on Saturday. We'll do the best we can. The kids that played a lot on Friday would not play a lot on Saturday. I mean, that's just the best we can. It's maybe not going to be optimal. We do realize these are teenagers and there's magic in games. And a kid could probably play 4 quarters on Friday and 4 quarters on Saturday and be just fine. Having said that, if you time them on Sunday, they would be diminished.
Yes.
So Sunday becomes really important. Sleep becomes really important. Once again, we go back to sleep, water, and nutrition. And so I would definitely, and you already mentioned kind of like the Feed the Cats basic, and Feed the Cats is not a system. Feed the Cats is kind of a mindset. It's a way to cook. The actual recipe for you, because you play the weird Friday, Saturday,
yes,
back to back, is not going to be the same as the recipe for Brad Dixon, who may play on Friday night with a Monday JV game.
Yeah.
That's a little different. But I think, you have your big Friday, Saturday. It's really important that you take care of your coaches. Really important, because not only do your coaches reflect your kids,
yes,
your kids will reflect your coaches. So, to have a 6-hour meeting on Sunday, in my opinion, would be asinine. You want the shortest meeting possible. And I would even look into what Brad Dixon does, where they do not meet. They Google Doc, they watch film on their own, how it fits in best with their wife and kids. Some coaches like to get up at 6 a.m. and work. Some coaches like to work when their wife and kids go to bed at night. But you've got to take care of your coaches and make sure they report on Monday refreshed and renewed and not in trouble with their wife and kids. So Monday should not be a performance day. Monday should be a fundamental day. It doesn't mean we're out there in flip-flops and like walking through stuff. It could be, but you can practice fundamentals and coach kids without putting on their game shoes and going at game speed plus. I would say Tuesday needs to be a performance day because you've had 2 days pretty much to recover. So you put on those game shoes, ramp it up on Tuesday. That does not mean hard.
Yeah.
We're kind of redefining hard here. If hard is full speed, yeah, it's hard. But it's not full speed with no recovery. And if football coaches think that's soft, then they're just not one of us. They're just not one of us. Wednesday needs to be a fundamental day. Game plan, strategy, fundamentals. You can block, you can tackle, you can catch, you can throw. I probably wouldn't have receivers running full speed, full routes, but you can run the end of routes. They can take 3 steps and catch it over their shoulder. That's not burning the steak. And then I would also perform on Thursday, but perform carefully. Like a half performance day on Thursday. One of the problems with pregame, coaches want to be fast, and that's fine. That's a performance level practice.
Yeah.
But sometimes coaches will do all their reps with their ones on pregame. And coaches that have purchased catapult systems have found out that those Thursdays that they thought were not burning the steak were actually burning the steak because their ones were getting more reps than they got all week. So you got to be really careful. You don't want to run a play 8 times and then move to the next play. You want like 8 different plays full speed with massive recovery. Talk in between. You do not, some coaches, once again, they don't want it to look like their practices look choppy, because there might be a dad in the stands that think they're unorganized, too much standing around. You want standing around in practice, especially on performance days. You want standing around, because in football, if you think about it, let's say a kid plays one way for you. That's 5 minutes of football in a 2.5 hour period. What's he doing the other 2 hours and 25 minutes? He's not jogging. He's standing around. I mean, literally 5-second bursts, about 50 times, 100 times, whatever. And then the rest of the time he's standing around like he's loitering. But yet loitering is illegal in practice. No loitering in practice. But wait a minute, coach, we loiter pretty much 95% of the game. I don't give a shit. We're going, so yeah, you got to get away from that. Then of course you perform on Friday and Saturday. And I love what Brad Dixon does. Brad's a good friend and the godfather of sprint-based football. And he does like a 20-minute warm-up. You know how teams will get out there for 90 minutes, run like 2,000 pass patterns and blah, blah, blah. Just makes no sense. He spends about 20 minutes doing RPR on the gym floor. They go out, like a short warm-up, and then they're like an uncaged animal come game time. Oh, one other thing, Dan Casey, another good friend of mine, he just put out his 3rd book on mesh. He has his last book before that was on screen. The book before that was on counter. And he's just a brilliant, brilliant young coach. And when he was at St. David in Raleigh, North Carolina, he's in Houston now. But when he was in North Carolina, he instituted a halftime in practices. He said his staff almost revolted. It's like, what? These guys are sitting around drinking Gatorade under a tree? Are you kidding? No, this ain't football. But if you think about it, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you reassess the first half with your coaching staff? Why wouldn't you let your kids really go through a 8-minute period, kind of like they would in a game? Let them sit around. Let's have a great second half. Everybody takes a water break. Well, it's just an extended water break. Exactly. And you may change your practice plans at halftime because of what happened in the first half. Oh, guess what? That's exactly what you do in a game. You may have a game plan that changes. Or maybe you had a great first half and nothing changes. Like, hey, guys, we had a great first half. This is what we're going to do in the second half. But I think all those things are really out of the box, new school, performance-based, making sure the kids really love their opportunity to play. And we would not do any of this stuff if it did not produce winning games. I just did a clinic in Fort Lauderdale last week with Les Bellman, Joey Garasio, and Tony Villani. And my presentation was the 5 whys and the 10 hows of Feed the Cats. The number one why, I've never given this presentation before. The number one why is winning. We're here, we play to win the game. So some people think that I'm like this softy that just trying to make a recreational fun activity for kids. Hell no. If we're not winning, we're changing things. So the number one reason why you go to a halftime in practice, no conditioning, performance days, fundamental days, no coaches meetings. The number one reason for that is not fun, it's winning. And so I think it's really important to say that.
Now, my last question for you before we wrap this up is, what do you think people that listen to you, looking to Feed the Cats, get the most wrong about speed versus non-speed days? Like, what do you think, like, obviously, what do you think the perception is, or how do you think they implement it wrong when you talk to coaches?
Do you want this answer in focusing on speed days and non-speed days in the practice week, or just generally Feed the Cats?
Just generally, like what do people get wrong about those days?
Okay. I think one thing is that we're not getting anything done, that, and as you know, when you record, rank, and publish, I've consulted with Princeton lacrosse, and they just, for the first time in 18 years, made the Final Four. And when they first implemented Feed the Tigers, they had 3 kids, terrific lacrosse program, 3 kids running 20 miles an hour. Now they have 20 something. And now they have a handful of kids running 22 miles an hour. I consult with the New York Yankees, exact same thing. They have reported back that their athletes from the minors all the way to the majors are looking forward to training. An eagerness, a joyful eagerness to train, which was never, when it was strength and conditioning, athletes didn't like it. Now it's speed and power, and they love it. Record, rank, and publish, they love it. So I think that people think we don't get anything done. We're just kind of there having fun, and fun. Cats are extremely competitive. Fun is, when I say our practices are fun, they're not grab ass fun. They're not goof around fun. They are fun in a competitive performance way. So I think that's real big. Number 2 is it creates softness. I believe that healthy kids that love their sport, I say all the time that we are willing to struggle and fight for things we love. We're willing to, if we don't love it, I think we give up. Yeah. So if you can get your football players to love the sport, and they're healthy and fast, I think they're tough as hell. I think they're hard. I don't think that toughness is the opposite of fast. I think fast and toughness can be together. And I think toughness comes, this is where I change. I mean, a lot of football coaches think that toughness comes from torture. That toughness comes from physical torture. And I believe toughness comes from love. Not love in a romantic way, love in an obsessive caring for what you do. So I think that's a big thing. I think that I say this all the time. It's important to say there are coaches that love my ideas that say I just can't do it because if I get beat, people will say I'm soft. That I was soft on the kids. And I say to them, I say, what would you rather lose and be hard-nosed and tough, or win and be soft? You know, for sure, coach, I'd rather be tough and hard-nosed. I said, so you'd rather lose than win? Well, I didn't say that. It's just that, well, see, that's the tradition we're fighting. We're traditionally, you would go for 2 weeks and coaches didn't care about your health. They didn't care about performance. They just beat the hell out of you. And that was to get you tough. And then they're going to back off a little bit on game week, but you've already done the damage. So I would say those are the biggest. Oh, last misconception, because I don't talk about the weight room, people think I'm anti-weights. When I say prioritize speed, they think lock up the weight room and prioritize speed. Priority does not mean at the cost of all other things. Because we prioritize speed, we do not deprioritize toughness. Like I said, I think that fast, healthy people that love football are going to be tough. I don't think we deprioritize the weight room, because I think the greatest warm-up ever invented for the weight room is sprinting. That getting your CNS lit up, when your CNS is on fire. And my guys feel better after a sprint workout than they did before. Yeah. So then they walk into the weight room, and weight room people report back to me that those guys are dialed in. They are performing in the weight room. I just think that sprint work is going to make the weight room better. Oh, and then I keep thinking of other things. The last thing I want to say is that they'll be poorly conditioned. And what I say is that fast guys are fast in the fourth quarter.